welcome back to this week's Inter-University Interface. With me here, I'm joined by distinguished lady and gentlemen from renowned universities here in Uganda. So with me here, I have Miss Muyita Sarah from Makerere University. Right next to Miss Muyita Sarah, I have Mr. Masawi Ivan. And just after Masawi Ivan, I have a gentleman that has appeared a couple of times on this show. You all know him, he's called Lawel Muhezi. So I'll give each of the panelists a minute to introduce themselves. Then we get straight into discussing today's topic, which is expired courses, what is the latest, and way forward for the affected students. I'll start with you, Ms. Muyita Sarah. Please introduce yourselves and you can say hello to the viewers.
Greetings, viewers. My name is Muyita Sarah. I am one of the victims of the issue of unaccredited courses, and I'm currently a master's degree student at Makerere University pursuing a master's degree in agribusiness management. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show, and we are privileged to have you.
My pleasure.
It's unfortunate that you are affected, but we'll get to that.
It is well.
Mr. Masawi.
Yes, thanks a lot to our viewers at Civic Space TV and our moderator for hosting us as Kyambogo University. We are really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masawi. We are humbled and always privileged to have you on this panel discussing issues that are pertinent to us. Yes, Mr. Lawel Muhezi.
I'm once again happy to be here, to be part of the general discussion. I hope and look forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Douglas Drekonen. I'm going to be your host for today's show. And let me just go straight into the conversation. Today we are discussing expired courses. What is the latest and way forward for affected students? And right next to me on my right hand, we have an affected student by the name of Muyita Sarah. Muyita Sarah, she's going to tell us a story before we go into the conversation deeply. Muyita Sarah had applied for a master's to go to the University of Bristol, but her application was declined on grounds that her course that she pursued wasn't accredited. So to help us break this down, I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Muyita Sarah to put this conversation into perspective and give us her story as we get into this discussion. Sarah.
Okay. Last year, I applied at the University of Bristol to pursue a Master of Climate Change Science. And I was pretty sure I was going to get it because I had the good grades and everything else that was required of me. But then earlier on, I had applied still at MOOC because the Makerere applications were closing earlier than the Bristol applications were beginning. So the plan was that if I get admitted at Bristol, I quit the MOOC course, and I was definitely going to get a scholarship to fund my academics at University of Bristol. So in January, they sent me rejection remarks, and they categorically said that the course I studied was not accorded the right accreditation that was required for me to be admitted into their university. Of course, I was frustrated. So in their rejection remarks, they actually put links that were leading me to the National Council of Higher Education website. I checked, and yeah, I checked for my course that I did at undergraduate, and it was showing expired under the status of the accreditation. But even then, before that, I had had colleagues of mine who had issues similar to that because I was a students leader, and I think there were some two guys who had complained about that very issue in one of the college leadership WhatsApp group we had. But then the college leadership was not responding. They never respond to such issues. So when I fell victim, I quickly ran to that very WhatsApp group because it has literally all the university, college administrators. So I asked them why they have not been working on this issue even when students have been complaining. So I think the Dean of Students came out and said that they reviewed all the courses and they submitted to National Council for review. And then I think some lecturer came and said that the National Council website is just not updated, that they've worked on the issues, which I didn't really think was true, because there were some universities whose status, like they had just accredited their courses, like I think a month back, and that was reflecting. So I didn't really buy the idea of the guy who was saying that the accreditation, rather that the website was just not updated. So I left it at that, but then still tried to follow up. I actually inboxed the principal of the College of Veterinary Medicine then, and he told me the same thing, that they reviewed their courses and they are under review. I'm like, okay, let's give it a benefit of doubt. So I think in around March, there was some link that was going on. I think it was from NCHE talking about accreditation and something like that. So at that point, still, I went back to that WhatsApp group and I asked the Dean of Students, how far with this, since you said you guys were following up? He didn't respond to that. I again reached out to the principal of the college on the same matter. He told me, thank you, Sarah, for your concern. We are going to follow up. The university will engage National Council of Higher Education. I'm like, okay. At that particular moment, still, I reached out to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. For him, he just didn't respond. I told him everything. I even told him I missed an admission. I shared with him the links from NCHE. He did not respond. I'm like, okay. So it was after. So I looked helpless, because, I mean, these are the guys who are supposed to help us work on those issues, but they were really not being responsive. Those who are being responsive are just, I think, giving me feedback for the sake of giving me feedback. So I think after a month, it's when I think the Students' Guild took on the mantle to try and push the university to tell us why we are having expired courses. I think most of the students did not know, but me, I actually knew there was something to do with accreditation that was not right even before I had graduated. But then we really didn't have anything to do about it, because even when we reached out to the administrators, they weren't giving us the feedback we required. They were just responding for the sake of responding. So the University Guild, the MOOC Guild, came out so strongly on that issue, and that's when the media also got involved. And I'm glad the world now knows what is going on in the country. And we are hopeful that now the issue is out there. We are hopeful that we shall get solutions that we need. We are not here actually to expose the universities, shame them or something, but we are here to get solutions. Me, I'm like the sacrificial lamb, yeah? We are looking at the other students who are in universities known to face the same challenges that we faced. I think that's a brief of what exactly happened.
Thank you. I'm very sorry for your unfortunate encounter to miss your opportunity at a very prestigious institution like the University of Bristol. Nonetheless, your story that you have shared today and puts into perspective why we actually need to talk about this issue and what is the latest and what is the way forward that we need to discuss. So I would like to engage with you, Mr. Masawi Ivan. When you listen to Ms. Sarah's story, you get particularly I picked out three things. The incident whereby she reached out, one of the lecturers coming out and saying there's a possibility that the website of the National Council for Higher Education wasn't updated. She also talked about the issue to do with other authorities just giving feedback for the sake of giving feedback. But we know that National Council for Higher Education, its functional role is to go ahead and accredit courses at institutions of higher learning. Now, I would like you to, as we start this debate, I would like you to put into perspective the role of National Council for Higher Education, particularly on the topic that we're discussing today on expired courses.
Yeah, thank you very much, our moderator. First, sorry to my sister here, who missed. You know, when you talk of Bristol, most of our viewers should know this is the UK. They may mistake it for Bristol somewhere else. This is an European offer that builds your network and exposure to international standards. So, and Makerere University, where she was a member, is the best university in Eastern Central Africa. And it is the face of Uganda's tertiary institution. So, if this is at Makerere, as from sister universities like Chambogo, we should be fasting and praying more. Coming back to your question, the National Council for Higher Education, which works under the Act of the University and Other Tertiary Institutions Act 2001, amended 2003 and 2006, is an institution established basically first to ensure quality assurance within the higher institutions of learning. That is to say, quality management, quality audit, quality control, in terms of staff, in terms of finding that courses are fit for purpose, in terms of finding that the universities themselves are fit for purpose of education. It still has a quality framework and licensing framework. And with the topic today regards to accreditation, it is the only institution in this country that works, because as students we subscribe a 20,000 fee every academic year to the National Council for Higher Education to make sure that annually we pay for our accreditation and subscription. So that is its role under the laws of Uganda, under the Education Act, and under the University and Other Institutions Act. That is its role as the National Council. So its general work is to regulate, is to enroll new universities on board, but also ensure standards, and standards is the quality. Going into the debate, we have seen a lot of denials from the minister. When we went to Parliament, we saw the Attorney General referring to the word used as expired as a wrong use of maybe literature or words. I don't know why. In Uganda today, it is a little not surprising that you find people defending what we should be sitting down to reflect on how best can we get out of such a situation. First, when we look, I am a student from a public university. If the National Council was established when universities were not more than 10 around back then, today only public universities are around 14. Every year, its government as it is going towards an election to create a public university. Total universities in the country are around 60. The structures of the National Council for Higher Institution itself have not changed. We have only seen it undergo a budget cut from the money it was collecting to URA. We have only, I think the biggest achievement he has achieved in the last 10 years is getting a new headquarters in Chambogo, and the land which was part of Chambogo University. And then the head of National Council is a Chambogo University Vice Chancellor. I think it is another branch of Chambogo, but not Uganda. I really always doubt its capacity. So when it comes to its mandate and role, it should be the face of the output of graduates on the market. It should be taking center stage, because every student, by the time you join university, the responsibility is yours to choose, but government, as government, you need to guide the population, because they entrust you with that responsibility to have such institutions in place to protect the students. Because when the market of education is not protected and is not governed, and there is no reservations, there is no regulation, then automatically what is on the Ugandan employment market is what we were expecting. So it is so bad for my sister, so unfortunate. It is disheartening because you've sat on someone's dreams, something which is not good. But we all call to those responsible, as we may discuss it forward, that even with their deficiencies, because even some of the courses being taught in these universities, National Council has no experts. Because quality assurance at a basic level means the course has the qualified lecturers with the qualified standards in the framework. Because once your course is not accredited, it means the people teaching under the quality assurance framework and licensing processing some don't meet standards. Majority may be part-time lecturers. These are people who are at the university's mercy to get salary. Practicals, labs, field trips, all those are part of quality. Course content. So if courses are not accredited, how sure are we of the course content we are being examined on?
True.
It means all that there is a big challenge, and we can't end it at national council. I think the whole education sector, beginning with the minister herself, they are grappling, because we saw it came abrupt. Dr. Mwingo's response was as if he's a guest from another country to Uganda. This is even appropriate owning schools in the country. But you respond that we shall punish National Council for laziness. Really, who have you punished? They make it look as if it is something jokeable, but these are futures of Uganda. This is the next generation. The country will be blamed, will fall lame or limp because of the quality of education offered.
Definitely.
So that is it.
Thank you, Masawi. You bring a very interesting perspective into this conversation, particularly how you pack the role of National Council that it has to play in this country. What I get from your argumentation, the major role or the key function that National Council is supposed to execute is to go ahead and accredit academic and professional programs, which from your submission you say that maybe failed in doing so. If I hope I'm right from what you submit.
Actually, both. The whole system has failed. Because even universities, for example, a law course is to be accredited every 4 years. But you pay every academic year the 20,000. By the time you're reaching 4th year, you're even not graduated, the course has expired. Between that time of finishing and graduation is where the university needs to send courses for review and reassessment. By the time you're graduating, your course is expired.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Thank you. I would like to engage with you, Lowell. We know that the governing council then, in December of 2008, came out of the National Council for Higher Education, came out with guidelines that institutions of higher learning are supposed to submit the details to the National Council for Higher Education for reassessment every after 5 years for undergraduates, for masters programs. That is every after 5 years, and for PhD programs was for every after 10 years. That's supposed to mean that institutions were supposed to submit the details for reassessment. But what we're faced with today, the newspapers and the information we have, close to 2,000 courses were dubbed expired, and other courses were still under review. Maybe they could be either expired or not. Now, that being the case, with over close to 2,000 courses dubbed expired, and Mr. Masawi was just assessing the role of National Council for Higher Education. Now, my question to you, therefore, is we have seen numerous, we have seen institutions that have been affected, that their courses expired 8 years ago, right? 8 years ago, and yet the guidelines that were issued by the National Council in 2008 in December said you submit your details for reassessment every after 5 years. But there have institutions that have courses that have been expired for close to what? 8 years. Now my question to you is, where has National Council for Education gone wrong? Or is it National Council to blame or the institutions?
Thank you so much. I'll respond to that question, but for me, I think, a general concern, and I don't think it's government. I think that everyone else. It's funny how all of us really like to discuss the technicalities, especially the legal fraternity, how you want to say, who has powers or not. I think for me, it is supposed to be that as citizens, we must be concerned about what is the quality of education we are having. Because the reason why any National Council of Higher Education existed was a realization that there is need for courses offered at higher level
of learning
to meet particular standards.
True.
What the implication of this is that students are pursuing courses that don't meet any standard. That's my point. accreditation exists, like he has outlined the criterion, that for a course to be offered, worthy of putting out particular quality of human resource in the labor market should meet these standards. So you have a cohort of like 7 years at law school that pursued a course which did not meet a particular standard. The problem we have then is that there is this whole thinking that Makerere or Chambogo is so big that you should trust it over and beyond the presence of anybody that is supposed to approve its courses.
Okay, that public
that,
universities are
yes,
safe.
and that is very dangerous because you cannot have a system that self-assesses itself. Because how are we supposed to know surely that the courses Makere is offering are up to world standard, up even to national standards? You get my point? So why aren't we having a discussion on the quality that we are, the consequence of us having courses that are not accredited? Because for me, that discussion is not happening. No one is complaining that we have poor quality education or we have poor education. And because, and for me, it speaks to the entire population, to the entire government structure, that we don't care. And we continue to have these debates. Who has the power? Is it the University Senate and Quality Assurance? Is it National High Council? I'm like, look, if indeed Makerere University has done its job of, because I've been part of the University Senate, I've interacted with Quality Assurance. I know that they are credible, but to what standard? Because the truth is, it doesn't matter how strong public universities are vis-a-vis the quality of a national council. The question is, no entity can self-regulate. Think about it this way. Even if an organization has the best auditor, there's a reason why we always have external auditors. It is a realization that organizations have an incentive to, like their interest is themselves. They don't care about out. That's secondary. So it's highly likely that even universities care much more about them offering courses and producing products. That is why there has to be a third party which has to rein on them, to regulate them. What we have currently is that there is no one who is doing that. And so we are somehow depending on the goodwill of these universities. We assume that they are like you can't hold yourself to a particular standard yourself. That is why we always have external bodies to always hold us to a particular standard. And so for me, the consequence of all this is that you have a country which is producing products which don't meet a particular standard. And for me, that is the implication. And I think it goes to the core of, and those universities are right. How do you trust this product? Because to them, they understand systems. They understand how systems work, how they're supposed to function. You get. So we have products, like, including me who has done 2 courses, which don't meet a particular standard. And because we have self-aggrandized government personnel like leaders of universities, the Attorney General, they don't look at this discussion. They just want to, show that they are always right, that they are right, and that everyone else who is criticizing does not understand how these things work. You get that they don't address the issue. But then going back to the discussion everyone likes, I think that one, National Council of Higher Education, just like many of the government institutions, don't have capacity to do the job they're supposed to do. And it is highly unlikely, it's only now that you've seen it making headlines, it's highly unlikely that they have even the human resource personnel, even the budget itself to do the lot of work they're supposed to do. And if like I said earlier, if we appreciate the role that National Council of Education is supposed to do, then we'd understand that it needs a lot of capacitating to do its job efficiently, right? And I think they lack that capacity, and I think that is recognized, and I think that is also why it has drawn a perception that it can be done away with, that its process can be ignored. Because ask yourself, if National Council of Higher Education's role was being appreciated, no university would spend a year without making sure that those courses are accredited. I was part of the Senate, I think, between 2019, throughout even COVID, I think close to 2021. and that discussion was never center stage. So for me, what it tells me is that because there has not been an alarm from victims like Sarah, there have not been concerns, so the university was progressing well. I think the universities which actually were not considering that, I think the US and all that, so I think there was no pressure. And so because it was normalcy, they could afford to move away. But the Makerere, I know, if this had been an issue, they have more political and general power to push National Council of Higher Education. If it was their concern, they even have more capacity to pressure government itself to give them accreditation for those courses, if it was of utmost concern, because of their, you know how like Uganda is organized, their bodies which are strong, that if they had a particular interest, they would push for it and it would be realized. And I think this has not been priority, and I think this is a consequence of reluctance on both. One, National Council doesn't have capacity, but Makere also was like relaxed.
Okay, thank you. Masawi, I see you have your hand up. I think you're itching with something to say. Please go ahead and say.
He has really brought a perspective that I was really interested in, the goodwill and interest. When you look at the composition of the National Council of Higher Education itself, even in the leadership, the executive, Dr. Kwakol, I told you the head of vice chancellors at National Council is Professor Erika Tunguka. They share land title with Kyambogo University. 84% of Kyambogo's courses were not accredited. But Kyambogo University and National Council of Higher Education sit on the same land title. Yes? The Vice Chancellor of Kyambogo University is the head of Vice Chancellors on the board. But with 84%, that the products of these universities who are unaccredited are the ones working at National Council for Higher. Let's not think they import external foreigners from anywhere to work at. These are fellow Ugandans from the very universities which are unaccredited, working in a system. So where is the goodwill from first the government which put this body into place? Because we want to think National Council of Higher Education was brought on goodwill. But if Kyambogo University VC, who is a council member of National Council, comes out say he needs 60 million to see that the courses sent for review are accredited, and yet a student, you play your role of paying the 20,000 every semester. Actually, it's 22,000. Every Ugandan student pays National Council every academic year. So is where his perspective or his submission comes to play. There is completely no goodwill about our education. We have reduced ourselves that even our poorly taught courses that are poorly detailed, that are poorly in content, we want them to be accredited. We are so passionate about surviving with even what is not fit for purpose. That is where we lose it.
Maybe if I'm to interject, you see, when you look at the statistics of the courses that have been accredited, it's so interesting that these private universities, actually, most of their courses are accredited.
Yes.
The universities that have high numbers of unaccredited courses are the government-owned universities. And that shows you the kind of laxity that is within government-owned institutions and people that work in them. And you see this issue of expired courses just a tip of an iceberg. At College of Veterinary Medicine, lately, UVB, there is contention amongst UVB and the students. UVB does not want to register. UVB is Uganda Veterinary Board. They want to register graduates of veterinary medicine, claiming that they don't have, they're not qualified for field, and you cannot work, you cannot practice as a veterinary doctor when you're not registered under UVB.
Licensing.
And you see, it's the role of NCHE to even come and certify that the infrastructure present at the university is sufficient for the numbers they are admitting.
Fit for purpose.
Yeah. So the college, veterinary medicine, is now, I think, admitting high numbers of students because maybe for them they need the money and all that. But then the quality of the students that are getting out, the mere fact that
National
even
Council sets
UVB
numbers
is
for
concerned.
admission.
Just small, what she's saying, because there's a whole debate. The debate currently is on who is wrong and who is right. all of them, but when you examine deeply, they're both trying to protect themselves.
True.
The university is saying we reviewed, we are waiting for council to approve.
We submitted. They don't.
National Council conceding and talking about lack of capacity. It could also be that most of these courses actually don't meet particular standards.
The content
When you look at the lecturer-student ratio,
is so big.
especially in public universities, is wanting compared to even private. Because if you look at lecture rooms in private institutions, I don't know about their quality, but at the requirements, the interface, realize that they are much better. But also, especially for practical courses at Makerere University, there is a very big problem. There's a whole debate on things like laboratories meeting particular standards. Some of them are even so bad that they don't meet the bare minimum standards. I am aware there's a huge discussion at high levels of these public universities, but that's something that is being ignored. What you have with most of these public universities is measuring in PR, celebrations, guest lectures, but there is little concentration on the substance that universities are supposed to offer.
The quality.
If there was to be an objective audit, especially in the practical courses, especially in public universities, you'd realize there is a big problem. Now, committees like the ones she's talking about are the ones that are supposed to work with national council
Boards
to approve these courses.
Professional boards.
When you see them having
Shying
these
their way.
contentions, but they're not shying away, they're actually doing their job. And they care about their profession. What they are communicating is that these courses don't meet standards. And Makerere University, no one is holding, even in this public discussion of expired courses, no one is holding Makerere University to those questions. No one is asking them, indeed, is the problem in NYC, is it between Senate and quality assurance? The problem could be that we don't meet this standard. If there are actually those standards that be applied to strict sense, I'm sure most public universities would still not be accredited. And then there is a big problem.
National Council may also be having a problem.
It's okay. I would like to come back to you, Ms. Sarah. From all the conversations we have had here, we get the sense of the feeling that the conversations of who is to blame actually isn't what we're supposed to be talking about. The fact is we need to hold the particular offices accountable and act particularly, because we are a generation that we are affected by this. And that means we are going to be not only affected nationally, but affected internationally as well. Which brings me to the conversation of quality, of the quality of education that we receive in institutions of higher learning. You know, we had the conversation here. The National Council is supposed to go ahead and accredit these courses. And we have courses, we have seen various circulars from various institutions saying this course has been packed to the shelf, it's no longer applicable here. Then my question then comes in the aspect of why are even these courses that I've mentioned still on the website of National Council for Higher Education? We're receiving communication from the various institutions saying this course is no longer applicable here, this course. Is there communication between National Council and the various institutions of higher learning?
Okay, thank you very much. You see, it's very good that we've actually come out and showed the public what exactly is going on behind closed doors, because I recently was listening to what the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University was saying. He boldly said that he was apologizing that they did not have the right systems to monitor the expiry of courses, and now that we've come out, they're now going to put up a system to monitor. You imagine, for all the years the university has been in place, they are just waking up to know what they are supposed to do. It's quite ashamming. And you see, it's not even just about being admitted in a university to pursue further studies. Even when it comes to the employment field, most of these international organizations actually pay keen attention to accreditation. For example, UN Jobs, they categorically ask for accredited courses. So as Ugandans who are not looking at just being in Uganda, being employed in Uganda, we are being trained to be international citizens, and that's the role of quality education, not to serve purposes of just our countries, but around the globe, yeah? So connecting that to the memes that were going on social media, that these issues are for planned kids who want to study in Europe. It's not just about that, because 10 or 5 years from now, you'll want to get a job in the UK, and they'll ask for your courses. And we even do not know whether, if these issues are corrected, we who have studied in the times when the courses were expired shall get away with it, because the law does not work retrospectively, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So in as much as they'll accredit the courses, maybe this year or next year, shall we survive? Will the damage be sorted? Or it's a permanent damage that we have to, deal with? So I think we need to get these answers from the concerned authorities, the government of Uganda, because NCHE is an establishment of the government. So the government, through the Ministry of Education, they have to come out clearly and they tell us, because we can say as Uganda that it's okay, those who started during the time of when the courses were expired, you'll get away with it. But then the international standards, they will still say, but by the time you did your course, it was expired, so we don't consider this. So is this something permanent that we have to deal with? We really need to get those answers from...
Thank you. I would like to engage with you, Masawi. Ms. Sarah brings very, very concerning insights in this debate. Her herself, she's a victim of this expired course, which now brings me to the conversation to relate with the impact of expired courses. She brings out a very clear illustration that we know that we have international organizations that particularly look out for students or professionals who have attained accredited degrees. And we know that there are students who, at the time of them pursuing their degree, the circular that moved around has it that some courses have been expired for close to 8 years. So that means you have almost like 3-4 cohorts of students who attained those expired courses out there looming, not even being in position to attain possible employment with international organizations later on, attain employment opportunities outside there in terms of employment or even education. I want you now to help us look into the impact of this particular, of this issue of expired courses. How deep is it? What kind of conversation are we avoiding and running away from the reality of the impact of these expired courses?
Yeah, my brother brought it very well. Unfortunately, we are at an inter-university debate, we discuss university education. But the education system of this country, if we are to open had a debate at that level, especially the members on the panel, especially who have passed public school of the UP and USE, we really discover it is a survival for the fittest.
True.
So, and when you survive, you reach university and you start an expired course. And when you start an expired course, you can't go far, apart from again remaining here to survive with opportunities here.
Which are not there.
First, from a general perspective, the education, I don't know, because government is your role. We are shying away from the governance. But this government, especially in the last 10, I think from Namirembe Bitamazire, I also sat PLO in those days. From Namirembe Bitamazire, there has been increasing trends in the education. I don't know who is the current Minister of Education, but really, madam, wherever you be, I think you owe Ugandans an apology. Especially a lady like her. She has visions which are not to be of a first lady, but she has her personal visions that she needs to pursue, that were let down because you are sleeping on duty. All national council, we pay in a serious government, in a serious country. Governments pay national council, but here in Uganda, students, we subscribe every academic year. We pay for these services that we have not. She paid throughout her course tenure for national council to accredit her course. She lost. She has all the right to take national, carry her receipts, take national council to court. But just that when a government has failed institutions, these are some of the fruits that we take home. But it's very unfortunate, those in governance, especially in education, we need the students an apology, because This is a country with 78% of its population below age of 30. Most of these people are in
Still in
school.
school. True.
Now, what is the motivation they are getting about education? Because education builds a nation. It is what you sell outside Uganda. Your human resource of a country is built on its education system.
True.
But if we are building systems on an education we don't trust, an education that we don't invest in, an education that we don't want to market our own products. She was going to market Uganda abroad, even with her personal goals. But the essence of her going there is to market Makerere University, that it produces an international competent student. But if the country is absent, because now we want to take it that the government is absent in our education, we shall have, because the impacts you're interested in, first she's a victim. That is already an impact. We have competition. We are going into regional blocks of East African community. As long as we go to blocks and our issues, personal issues, are not well streamlined and organized, we don't have leverage. How will you compete with a Kenyan job when a person from UON, University of Nairobi, is accredited? For you from Makerere, you are unaccredited. Even if the job is in Uganda, once you're in a regional block, you lose such benefits.
True.
Even with this coming of companies to do here work, the
Total and
Total and Sinok and what? These are international organizations. The president sits down and welcomes investors to come and invest in Uganda. But these investors have terms and conditions for example, because they will tell you we are going to give Ugandans jobs. But what is their job criteria? They end up, you saw in Umeme, they were importing South Africans back to work here. But it's not because they advertise in New Vision, but Ugandans won't meet. Reason, the education system itself is not producing competent products. And the education system, we have reduced it to saying we discuss accreditation. But it's content. There is no reason why someone would have been finishing university to now begin to say, I have finished university, then a country should have graduates tool, like for graduate training tools in place already catered for. Graduate skilling tools, like they should be. I've seen in countries like Nigeria where they have a national youth councils, which are, they have a voluntary scheme for graduates. People finish campus universities when they are attached with its big population of almost going to 200 million people. Those who lose out to become soccer people, there is some small plan for an African country. But now this shows absence because the impacts, we shall discuss the impacts because we are lucky we have reached university, especially me from Bududa. I'm now lucky I've reached university, I can discuss impacts. But the whole structure, there are a lot of people who lost off along the way. Very many along the way because of the whole structure. Now, the current programs the government is again planning, its priorities are stand that public university budgets have been cut. Most of the money is being state house to put skilling the youth programs. Universities, they are now skilling the youth programs around this money. We have a skilling hub for NRM, for what? Is taking priority over universities. Who will plan for the country when Makerere graduates are not priority. I want to think that Museveni is not by CV, but he attended. I want to believe the people in power attended. Because they are them telling us they were at Makerere University when they were passing by to the bush. Yes? Because if you know it took you to Makerere to be able to be a president of this country, you should have keen interest in issues of education and of university. Because her being a student of Makerere University completely defines the challenge in the country. Because this is the best university in the region. Not only Uganda, but even in Africa, it is in the top 5. So us, because I want to even applaud private universities, especially now members of UCU and the rest. These universities have been honest and tried their level best. Because of that independence that they rely on students' money, let's put it to good use. We pay our money, it goes to URA, it is carried in sacks to do projects, we don't know where it works. We sit in a university, the functional fees, A university like Chambogo has some buildings that you may think were donated by colonialists or they were stores. A university that is having a student ratio of 1 to 400 for like faculty of arts and social sciences. One lecturer needs to mark like 1,000 scripts. This is an individual who is always on strike, paid salary rate. Because we are even ignoring those issues. Because the National Council for Higher Education itself states all that in its quality assurance framework. The standards of the lecturer, which is assistant lecturer at a master's, senior lecturer, doctorate, PhD, associate professor, they state all these standards. But even these public universities have shied away from these standards because first, they don't have enough human resource. Secondly, like she brought the issues of the board. All these boards that are even Uganda Medical Association are having challenges of even getting internships for doctors because the universities are doing mass admission. If you call a job for a lawyer today, you will get 10,000 to 20,000 lawyers. Then you wonder, did the whole country go to law school or what? There is a big problem.
It's okay.
National Council is responsible to regulate even at admission because you have interface with the job market. You are an expert. You need to see which course is fit for purpose for the market, which course needs review, which course needs reassessment, and help the National Planning Authority in planning for this country.
All right, thank you. Right, our time is fast spent. We are going to go for a short commercial break, and right from there, we shall begin with you, Mr. Lawal Muhezi, to help us still unpack this conversation. It's an interesting one, and I haven't actually realized the time has gone, but we shall be back. Please stay with us. We are discussing expired courses, what is the latest and way forward for the affected students. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. Right before the break, Mr. Masawi was giving us a perspective and analyzing the impact of these expired courses on students. And he brings to this debate very interesting insights. Particularly, he juxtaposes and uses example of the recent budget cuts that we are seeing on public institutions on assessing the quality of education that is being given to students. He talks about lecturers not being motivated and the criterion that National Council ought to follow when going ahead to give guidelines to these institutions to come up and accredit them in terms of what lecturers to put in which particular course and how. Now, I would like to engage with you, Mr. Lawal Muhezi, from where Mr. Masawi Ivan has halted. I would like you to help us go deeper into analyzing this particular impact on not only grounds of employment, but looking onto the overall impact on the educational and career trajectory in this country.
Thank you so much. I think way back, I've always told friends that everyone is a when we fail to participate in leadership, we are all going to like some fair price for it. I think what we also have, and I think that's what he was struggling to bring out, he was being modest. But I think what we have is a consequence of bad governance and leadership. and then it manifests in all government systems. Like none of them then gets to be spared. Doesn't matter whether it is health, education, and all that. And now this time, Sarah is a victim. God knows how many more have been victims.
Even us, we are
but couldn't-
victims, but because we have not applied to Bristol.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
they are victims of just this particular section, but there are very many other ways how we all get affected because we detach ourselves from the questions of leadership of this country. If you listen to most of the CEOs in this country, they don't believe largely that the problem is lack of employment. They think the problem is that the graduates are unemployable. What they are trying to say is that they, as much as we have these degrees, they don't think that we fit the available jobs, our level of productivity, the quality they think is actually lacking, that the products are unemployable. It all goes back to the quality of education. I think what my biggest concern is, as a people, we don't care about like global competition. If I have the opportunity to interact with like people from different countries, based on my interest and maybe some of the work we do, and you realize there is a very huge disparity in terms of world perspective of all these different graduates from different parts of the world.
True.
And then you ask yourself, oh, what about us? Like
What
none
went
of
wrong?
us is concerned about what is our role in the global politics or global discussion at work. And like Sarah says, if you want to compete for a job in the UN with anyone outside Africa, you're much more likely not to get it because of the quality and some of the structural challenges. And people who are on this panel are of particular level of quality in terms of discussions and intellectual discourse. If you go out there in these universities and you want to have an interaction with an average student, without even looking at accreditation, you realize there is a very, very
Huge
huge
vacuum.
problem.
Same
And
course, but you speak
exactly.
different language, different
The
content.
level of conversation is different. Whereas when you discuss, and this is not that I'm not patriotic, but when you're discussing with an average student from any university, they may not be passionate about politics, they may not be passionate about the law, but whatever field they are in, they are able to have a thorough discussion on issues that are basic to every human being or any intellectual graduate, that they have a huge understanding. And that really lacks in our product. So the implication of this kind of lack of quality has an implication in the global sense. I don't know if because of our level of imagination, we don't seem to be really concerned about what does this mean at the bigger stage. The implication of the accreditation itself, I think it is very clear. Any person who is outside Uganda would understand that there is a structure of how courses are accredited, that there is a university which gets accreditation from a body established by government to approve those courses. The implication of that is that if it is not accredited, then it's not meeting a particular standard. So if you're anyone who is employing or admitting that student, it means they pursued a course that does not meet minimum standards. That's the implication. The problem we have is because of our lack of wider imagination, we only look at it here because if you step out of Makerere and go to any organization, they will just give you a job. But if you are looking at it in the bigger sense, even if you have an international body operating here, they know that there is a structure through which courses are accredited, are approved. When you don't have accreditation, it means you don't meet the standards, which means that course you pursued either didn't have the content, relevant content, maybe the lecturers didn't meet. There's no evidence of that because the person supposed to prove that has not done their job. And so the implication is that then you cannot actualize in a broader sense if you're someone who is pursuing bigger dreams than the average. And then the other discussion is on what does it mean for those who did these courses. From a legal understanding, for me, is that if you have pursued a course that does not meet standards and you graduate, you can't assume that once a new cohort comes in and at that time they accredit, then for you, by implication, you've also been accredited. It means that you pursued a course that was not accredited.
It's null and void.
That is
You
the
don't
legal
exist.
implication. There's this whole argument that your knowledge doesn't expire. The thing is, if you are driving a vehicle with an expired license, it doesn't matter. At that point, the traffic police is going to punish you because the license you have, driving license, is expired. It may not mean that you forgot how to drive, but the implication of the legal implication is that you don't qualify. I don't know if you get my point.
I do.
And that's why we have things like certificates, like degrees. Those certificates imply something. It doesn't mean that you don't have the skills. They are just evidence that indeed you achieved this milestone. It's the same thing. The course you pursued did not meet standards of the body that is supposed to accredit them. Now, any employer outside Uganda doesn't care about the inadequacies with the structural problems in Senate or National Council of Education.
Even not the first lady is the Minister of Education.
That, I don't know if you get my point. That is the implication. And the problem is, I think also the people, government and these institutions have better PR personnel than the people. The people don't, most of the people don't care, they don't understand the implication, but also they are not strong on activism. Whereas the people who are in wrong have all this machinery, they control information, the narrative. And so that's why, again,
They tell people not to panic.
Now, Angwe's Twitter controller is a very good one. He has a very Twitter
yes, that is why then you don't get the discussion. You want to know why? The only body that has power to hold government and parastatals accountable is Parliament. For quite some time, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament has also been member of Council of Makerere University. At a conflict of interest
oversight.
The minister who is supposed to hold, who is supposed to, push, is also the one in charge of government. She's the first lady. So if the inadequacies are so for financing, the money goes somewhere else where she has no problem with it. So she's not dying to make sure the ministry has money. So there's some sort of capture. There's no one to ask these questions. And this is the product. Like I said from the start, everyone is going to face the consequences of bad leadership.
All right. You have something to say?
Yeah, if I may add on what he's trying to say. You see, the issue we are having is that the people that are concerned, when you hear them talk, it's like they're trying to deal with the symptom and not the disease, telling the NCHE to use another word, not expired, that's a bad word. But that does not solve the real problem that we are having, whether they use which other term,
And if you use
it doesn't really matter.
Unaccredited.
So for them, what they are mindful about is how the public is perceiving this, how are the people going to think, how are universities abroad thinking about Makerere University. And by the way, it's not only Makerere University in the discussion, most of the public universities and private universities also have unaccredited courses.
I represent the highest public university.
So it's a serious matter, but the people concerned and are just mindful of how they are going to be perceived in the eyes of the public. For us, we are here to tell the public that yes, the courses are exactly expired, even when they want us to use different terms. I don't know for what reasons. Because if we say not expired, I understand that before a university is allowed to teach a particular course, it has to be accredited. But then the law also provides that after a certain period of time, it has to re-accredit to do curriculum review. And
the accreditation expired.
yes, exactly.
And before it has expired,
So
you need to have submitted for review and reassessment if it is fit for purpose.
That brings a discussion that for us who studied in that period, are our degrees null and void?
All right. I want to stick with you. I want to stick with you on that.
You may not leave the studio.
I want to stick with you on that conversation. You see, in 2008, I said in the month of December, the then Council for National Council for Higher Education came up with guidelines that institutions of higher learning ought to submit their credentials every after 5 years for reassessment. Failure to do so, they would dub that course expired, right? And that's why the term expired came about. We find the Attorney General commenting that we shouldn't use the term expired, and yet that is the right term to determine these courses. And these are conversations we young people ought to engage in and talk about because it affects us. For them, they attained their degrees at a time whereby the governance possibly was okay.
And Obota and Amin, they were lucky.
Just
Yes.
information. That Attorney General himself has been a member of Macquarie University Council for the
Yeah,
last 5 years.
Yes, now
is right, legal.
that is why it is very imminent for us to have this conversation. Now, you bring out the perspective of your courses. Is it now null and void? Because my understanding of the law, as Lau put it, if you pursue a course at a particular time whereby, let's say, you enrolled for an LLB program, and you enrolled in the year 2020. Your accreditation expired in the year 2019. You pursued your LLB up to the year 2024. My understanding of the law is that period you pursued that degree is it's not recognized.
It's unlicensed.
Yes, it's unlicensed. Now, that understanding of the law applies, in my opinion, applies to every other course. Now, my question to you is, what way forward? What way forward do you recommend? Because we have assessed the challenge, we have assessed the problem. Is there a way forward for us to move from this particular challenge that we're facing?
Interesting. This is such a big issue, and I think we have to take it a notch higher, even outside the studio. We need serious engagements and feedback from the government of Uganda, the universities, and National Council of Higher Education. Are they going to pay for these damages? Because in my understanding, well, we might be safe in the Ugandan perspective, but how about globally?
The world is ever becoming a small global village.
Exactly, because it's very easy for them to say it's okay, but the other guys understand systems and they will still dig out, and they know that in this particular moment in time, when you acquired your degree, your course was not accredited, and these same things are going to be unfolding. So we need serious solutions. We need feedback. These guys should come out clearly and tell us the way forward for us students who have succumbed to this.
Okay, let's just imagine the government comes out and says, okay, we are speaking on this. Is that solution? Because they can speak, but the fact is you have attained a program that was unaccredited for that period.
All you can get is damages.
Anyways, let me engage with Masawi, because the government can still come out and speak, yes, and tell people not to panic. They dubbed that document that had Cambridge fake, and yet you are denied an opportunity from Bristol. Lowell brings a perspective that the government has all the armory to go ahead and control the public relations and how people perceive these things, which is particularly making Ugandans stay comfortable. But we don't. We speak up because we want solutions to the problems. Now, I would like to engage with you, Masawi. Let's say the government comes out, speaks on this issue, which has already done. National Council for Higher Education even released a press statement on its website, dubbed that Cambridge document fake, went ahead and it gave very nice English there in a 2-page document. In your opinion, what do you think must be done for this problem to be solved?
Thank you, moderator. You know, in this country, there are problems we inherit. And we have really inherited a failed education system. When you join Kyambogo University, there are issues that while you are applying, you hear of, but you leave when they are still at their peak. Issues like missing marks, money, no practicals for certain days and weeks. And when you sit down, I got a chance to be a student's leader. You sit down with even top management at Senate level, even attend council. You really discover that most of these people are also vulnerable. They come to these jobs not because they are passionate about Uganda or what they studied as professionals in education, but for survival. He looks at his salary, the economy itself, the environment in which he's doing the administration, and he's living for survival. He's more scared of tomorrow than a student who even doesn't know, who's uncertain of the future. So when you ask what is the way forward, even when we request Parliament to go and do a policy review from the Act itself, from why they had to put a National Council of Higher Education in place, this is why we are dealing with futures and time. Already future has been wasted. the current status of our unemployment levels, especially as the graduates. Shall we say that now those who are already unemployed, we have jobs for you? It doesn't just, it can't level. People have lost, you can't say there is compensation. These are not damages that all of us, we can now go and demand for our damages. Your future has no damage. There is no insurance. You either leave it because we are on earth for a certain period of time. You either leave it or lose it. Simple. We shall not wake up and say now we paid our 22,000 per academic year. National Council robbed us. It collided with universities. They robbed us, and government of Uganda as the chief robber. We have taken it to court to compensate us. Still, they are using your very money as a taxpayer to compensate. It even doesn't create sense. But I think it is upon us, like he said, especially us, the graduates. One of my mentors, Dr. Kiza Besigye, puts it right. He's very disappointed in us. And it is true. We are also we are compliant with the situation. We have discussed it. It has ended. Parliament talked about it for 2 minutes to end to issues of gays. Issues of gays were more important than the education of their children. Yes, because them, they know the system is failed. You will have to place your son somewhere, whether he's bright or foolish. You need to place him. You will need to bribe a job at public service. The university, they don't cater about the quality of the education offered. He will try to take his for an international institution that is accredited. You us who are here to fail from here, ours is a different story. We need to look at the local context, become local investors, local entrepreneurship. Everything of ours is here. But then, because the people in power have now thought that them, they have a leverage to go and try somewhere else, they won't care. But the way forward, it needs, I think, reforms. Reforms in terms of policy. If it was a serious president, that all of National Council of Higher Education maybe would be out of office by now. There would be serious investigations showing interest that people who have lost money, because we lost money. We are not saying government robbed us. That is in simple terms. Because she paid. All her trust in paying that 22,000 functional fee was that her
includes all
her tuition. The time. Now, and it is very annoying that you're framing it that now the course is now that time. It is where some of our fellows who drop out are now beating us because he has saved a lot of his time and expectations and energy into the informal sector and is doing well. Now you're here waking up in a court that are telling you you've wasted in an expired course. Is there anything that can be used as compensation? It is not there. They can't, even if they apologize, good enough, they're arrogant, they don't apologize, they don't care. But he said it very well. We have got very compliant, and these are some of the fruits we reap. Because we have got very compliant, we don't ask. If it was not her being a person vigilant, interested, she would not have brought all the country to debate. By the time even the MOOC student guild existed, just like we are also in Chambogat, we existed. But we would overlook because you're interested in being around, available.
Perhaps you didn't know that Syria.
Syria, until she tested the waters, that she has become a prophet. Yes, it has now gone. But these are issues that have no insurance, no compensation, that it calls upon for government to first change its goodwill. Because even if they came out and apologized, without changing the root causes, the primary causes of this underfunding of the education itself, below even the treaty levels that government is part. Once the education is underfunded, we have lecturer to student ratio, which is one thing. We are here crying of accreditation. There are people who are crying of missing marks for years. Graduation list issues. But you cry for a graduation list, you even bribe. Students have been exploited by lecturer for sex over unaccredited courses. How do you compensate such an individual? This is a matter of life and death. Eh? You can't compensate a student who went through such pain. People got accidents going for exams, and you say the course is only we can wear for. So it calls government has been asleep. We shall never forgive them for whatever they have cost us because they have ruined futures. Hmm? If once you can't compete globally in this era, you're in trouble. If once you can't compete, because the opportunity is here to show that Uganda is leveraging, you should have capacity to compete with other people outside. Therefore, opportunities. There is no way you can say you have a credible education system when you don't compete globally.
Yeah.
It means your education, you're equal to Congo, who is still in war and still in issues, grappling. Because she markets Uganda's standards of education when she goes abroad. When we have a Ugandan doctor, a Ugandan lawyer at Hague or where, that shows how Uganda is competing. But now it means we may not have even the likes of Winnie and group who are working at a global level. Uganda is to go into crisis. Shall we have people to send on foreign or delegate or commissary
Because people
or
go,
even
oh,
ambassadors to go and occupy these spaces when the education, the levels, the basic requirements, which are grades, are doubted at an international level. So it is one thing, it calls for reforms, it calls for a serious review, because there is no way we can say even an apology is satisfactory to people who have lost a future. At least we can save. Maybe if there is goodwill, they can save. But you can't compensate.
all right, thank you. I would like to engage with you, Lawal. The tone in the room is one that is disheartening, it's heartbreaking, and it's one that calls for action. Call for action is the most important thing here. And we may have the reforms, we may have all that. But then, as Mr. Ivan put it, we cannot compensate the damages that have been already caused, the trauma that has been caused to victims like Sarah here and many others that have been affected by this. Now, let's assume we were to have a refresher course for the people who have pursued their programs in a period whereby their courses were dubbed expired. Would that be a viable solution? A refresher course in that put in mind the economic and time factor and how you deliver it to make these individuals credible outside there. Would it be a viable solution?
But I think away from maybe the financial consequences, I don't think that that's a possibility. I don't think that government or any institution is willing to do that, because that would be an admission that
There is failure.
yeah, and
They will
what
send
that
it
would
parish development model.
yes, the consequence of an outright admission, I don't think the political implications are
are
worth it.
good.
I don't think it's something they're willing to concede to. I think it's going to, again, to be either a political answer or some unscrupulous ways. What they're going to do, I think, is they're going to try to harmonize, such as retrospectively conditioning it, or like manifesting it as though it was accredited, and maybe the problem was updating, or it was they went to find a way of harmonizing.
Updating a website, only the data.
Yes, I think they're going to pursue unscrupulous ways to try to harmonize it to politically correctly displayed. I don't know if you get it. I don't think they are willing to admit outrightly. I also don't think that
Even the students are not really.
yes, I also don't think they are willing to do it with integrity, because there's no integral way of dealing with it, because the law is very clear. I think they're going to find a way of unscrupulously harmonizing that too, and I can predict this. That's what is going to happen. The question then is, to what extent are the other international bodies going to be vigilant in as far as looking out for those holes that are going to remain after they have tried to harmonize the system? You get my point? Again, if you then are applying, you want to pray that they don't find out. They are not as vigilant as they ought to be. For me, that's what I think. but I think it gets worse before it becomes better. I am a very, very optimistic person. I think that the fairness of nature is that it gives every generation or everyone an opportunity to build the country they want. I think that we still have a lot of time. I think that we can. I believe, me as an individual, that it is possible to change the fate of this country only if a few committed people can set out to do that. I want to also thank Sarah for getting out of her comfort to champion the cause. It's true that the law has been expired for about 7 years. No one has come out, and I think most of them see it and then they ignore it. But to have people who come out to say no, this has affected me, it has affected others, I think it is important to take it on. I think for me that's like my source of optimism, that there are people out there, the young people out there, who are willing to make a difference. I think that Uganda, for example, is very endowed, and it won't take a lot of time if people are serious to rebuild it. But in the meantime, it gets worse. But it becomes better. I mean, look at the discussion we are having. Like, what country? How can you have a country where courses are not accredited? You get my point. How do you have a country where the first budget that is cut is for education? Why do you have a debate where a country is debating removing government scholarship? That was proposed Parliament last year to reduce, to restructure government sponsorship.
And yet some of them are actually
Products.
recipients of
Majority are
Yes,
products.
but my question then is, how do you get to consolidate the cream? Because for any country to develop, its best students must be able to get education. So if you remove merit, how do you want to build a country?
but still on that debate,
I look at all these questions.
Lawel, on that debate of the cream, still it brings to my mind, I don't know if you saw the government list at the moment. The people that have been admitted in those government scholarships are people from top schools.
Yes, yes.
You see Chitende, you see St. Mary's Tisubi, you see Namagunga. And those are the only names you see.
And you still,
barely
yes,
see a
yes,
name.
and you still have a few who are likely to get district.
Yeah.
But the thing is, merit and getting a fine product, things like inequality are actually secondary. And that's not a discussion we are willing to have. The entire, across the globe, the structure is such that people have privilege. The question is, what the goal of building a country is having the best merit. Now, some people become meritorious because they have privilege. But the first thing you should have to build a country is that your best brains should be able to be in the workplace. So if you remove merit, because merit is the only way that is consolidated. If you, so the goal then should be, any serious country would say, how do we expand this scheme to make sure that even those who don't have privilege are added onto this, not removing merit and getting another structure.
Yeah. Thank you. This debate is interesting, and we can go on and on and on about this conversation. And I'm particularly intrigued, and I would like to thank you, Sarah, for coming out and speaking about this, because oftentimes Ugandans are comfortable in that comfort zone. The people who have actually maybe been affected but didn't bother as much. But this is a crisis that needs to be addressed. And as young people, we need to speak up, and we need to call for action, and we need to see reforms in these institutions. As all of you put it, there's an issue of governance that needs to be addressed. And unless we speak up and unless we act, definitely we will not expect a quick response from the bodies that are supposed to, make sure that there is action. Allow me to shift gears briefly before the show comes to an end. There's a very huge contentious issue at the moment. The issue of the Anti-Homosexuality Act. And it is something that has brought controversial and very, very strong debate, not only within the country, but internationally as well.
The biggest controversy in the world today. Controversial discussion.
So I would like to pick your insights, because we cannot have, we can have, we have discussed the issue of expired courses, but I felt we shouldn't leave the show without having picked your thoughts on that issue. I'll start with you, Sarah. What are your thoughts?
Well, I personally do not agree with homosexuality. And as an African who is taken to the African values, I was
Nalongo.
pleased with what the President of the Republic of Uganda did. And I think it should be a wake-up call for even other African countries to follow suit. I mean, we cannot be bootlicking the white man just because they are promising to give us handouts. Shall we live like that forever? If they don't give us their handouts, we shall still survive. I mean, there is always a way. When you're in times of diversity, even your brain thinks better. Yeah, so people shouldn't be worried that, oh, since we've not signed since we've signed the anti-homosexuality bill, they're not going to give us funding and all that. We shall find a way. We shall find a way.
Okay, those are your thoughts. Ivan.
Yeah, I want to congratulate Uganda. We were accredited yesterday. That is a good accreditation. The local man whose dreams and future is in Uganda. I congratulate whatever person, especially Honorable Asuman Basalirwa, who brought up the bill. Because morals, values, and characters are key. I think lack of morals is what has caused us to have people who can't accredit us. So, going forward, those who want rights, it is as simple as traveling to where those rights are, and you live where they are. There is no time. We have more serious issues in this country that, like what we have been discussing, than giving things that we know for. You know, this is all a project to confuse us. There is no way you can live discussing your education system to discuss issues of gays. Are you a product of a gay? It doesn't come up. So I don't know why that issue dominates our personal affairs. Also, from the governance perspective, you see at the angle at which they bring it, always they bring it when they know there is something that has gone wrong in Somalia, and then finance other people in the constitutional court to make sure it is pushed out. Hope this time it is real, because we know this government is not real. Most times it is only real in a day, then at night it is white at day, the night dark in the night. So we hope it was brought in goodwill. As Christians who are God-fearing, we celebrated. Hope the devil doesn't again take away our jubilations. Yeah, and these are small issues. We should not be worried of relief. Are we still at the extent of being worried for UN, Posho, and beans? Really, if they claim their certified existence in power have been productive,
And you
it is
see,
not an issue of social media is there to make people unconscious and interact. They have their right. But if now AIDS is the issue, at least we now know once you go into this, there is no donations for AIDS victims. Now play safe. Handle yourself with care. It will call people to be vigilant. We have, if Nova in Uganda is no, if what they say is real, there is no need for relief from foreigners. We can build ourselves here in Africa to our values, customs, and culture far better, unique to compete.
Now,
Hope it will not be an admission criteria to Bristol University. What are your own?
I think she had something to say.
yeah, I just wanted to add something on what you were saying. You see, the white man is quite interesting. These people are legalizing issues like abortion, and we would also say that that's violation of human rights. I mean, you're legalizing killing another human being. Yeah. So I think we need to stand firm as Africans for our values, not what for them they think is right.
I have very different
The abortion
views
is
on the
far
issue
worse.
of abortion, but I will not engage in that matter. Let me invite Lowell.
It's very difficult.
Will you get home?
I think it's a very, very big test on very many different aspects. One is when you interact with the South Sudanese, even some Kenyans, some people around East Africa, they admire Museveni because he manages to posture as a Pan-African, as a strong person. So I don't know.
At that time.
For me, this is a test on whether he indeed can defend his rhetoric, because he has been speaking strong on Africa. I think if this stands, it has implication then to what extent, how does this shape Uganda's future and Africa moving forward? Because then it is a question of when we need the aid, but what does that mean for us, for Africa? Because we need to be African, we need to build some sort of our own strength. We need to start to have our own identity in a global sense, because currently we don't factor, like no one cares about us. I think if we manage to keep this kind of stance, I think it's a beginning of rebuilding a self-sufficient, independent Africa. Get my point?
I do.
On the other side, is Museveni and the entire government willing to defend that? Is that priority to them, especially in light of how much this is going to affect us economically? The truth is about 40% of our health sector.
No, it is 50.
Yes, over
51
40%,
now.
including even the education sector is foreign funded. And so again, it is what do you value? Are you willing to defend your identity, even if it means taking a particular hit, economic hit?
Our debt at
You get my
81
point?
billion.
Because there's a particular big debt you're supposed to pay back to, I think,
IMF,
that is coming up.
and World Bank.
For me, and I have very serious reservation about Museveni. For me, it's not even about homosexuality. It's about can he hold?
So he will appear
Can
in
he hold
court and
food?
then say Ugandans are the ones
Can
who
he hold
want,
food?
but
Because
me, I
this is
don't
what I
want.
know. For me, if court nullifies this, I know Museveni didn't want it. I know if Museveni wants something and he finds it a very key thing to his ideological inclination, Pan-Africanism, courts wouldn't dissent even.
In
I know.
2014,
We
he
all know
wanted-
now that court would say what Museveni wants.
Yeah.
We have lived in this country long enough to know that. But I don't know, how does it play in the global sense? Because now there is an alternative, which is the Russia, BRICS, China. Because I don't think that the West doesn't need us. I think it also needs us. Because Africa seems to be up for grabs somehow.
There's that power
I
struggle.
don't know to what
They want to see
extent.
gorillas
I don't know
anymore.
to what extent the West is also willing to give away Africa. Because how also Among and Basarura have managed to foster it, they have made it. If you watch Suman's press conference, they are saying, look at what the West is doing just because we've disagreed with them. And I think it's reverberating around the entire Africa, and it's going to influence their policy on Africa and Africa's interaction with them.
Yeah, that Africa.
For me, it's a very
that
interesting
Africa-US relation now comes into play,
Yeah,
because
it's
the
an
West
interesting
will
thing.
particularly have a different image to the African
Also
continent.
in light of the Ukraine
which
debate.
in my opinion, I think it's a bigger debate
Yeah, it's a
altogether.
very
It's even
interesting
more. It's bigger than the homosexuality
For me, it's
issue.
not about homosexuality.
Yeah, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's politics at play, and big boy. It's a
It
big
is
boy
growth.
politics.
It is
yes.
growth. We are growing by accident, not by intention.
Well, we have reached the end of our conversation. It's been interesting having hosting you guys and bringing very insightful and interesting insights in this conversation. I'm particularly humbled and very privileged to for having you, Sarah, on the show, having you, Ivan, Lowell. You guys are very, very powerful people, and I can't just wait to see.
Lastly, before we
Yeah,
close,
definitely. You're going to briefly give your parting shots and say what you have to say, and we call it a day. I'll start then with you.
okay, yeah. So John Maxwell, in his book Change Your World, talks about how everyone has a role to play in achieving the kind of world you want to see. Imagine if the administrators I was reaching out to on this very matter of unaccredited courses acted, we would not be here having this discussion. But they probably thought, I can't do anything about it. It's beyond my control. It's National Council to do that. It's the Senate to do that. That's the very reason as to why we are all here. So as Ugandans, even outside this issue, let us all know that each one of us has a role to play. I would as well just sit back home and decide to keep quiet. And years later, we would have other students falling victims of the same issue. So let us all be patriotic and rise up. Let everyone play their role in their jurisdiction to change the world.
Thank you. Powerful. Ivan.
Yes. Thank you very much for hosting us. thanks to Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance, for always giving us as a young people such spaces to interact. To my fellow Ugandan people in school, the orphans, majority of you, I'll call you orphans, because once a government who should be your father doesn't exist to an extent that we have such serious issues and they are taken so lightly, it shows you're really on your own. We need to rise, we need to be ambitious, to be requesting for accountability, we need to be ambitious for requesting for better services. When some rise, they say they are political, they are tribal, they are looking for Mugati. But for once, be consistent. I want to thank my sister. When we speak like this, I know there is an office which will get one to be convicted and act. Thanks for having the brave act and having passion in saving a nation. Yeah, but to those in power, if I don't know if God will forgive you, but for us, we are not ready to forgive you. You need to really do enough. That is what I can say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can also forgive them.
Not for now.
Once again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Every time I come here, it's always interesting. But today it was particularly more interesting and engaging. The discussion on substance is always rare to find anywhere else apart from these spaces that you create for us. Maybe I want to talk to the ladies. I also live in an environment where you have a lot of, they find themselves as feminists and very powerful about rhetoric, but I hope Sarah could act as an inspiration to them, that the best thing they can do is be out there and champion real causes, real change. I feel like there's a lot of misguided heavy energy amongst our young brilliant ladies,
Wasteful energies.
that is not rechanneled to constructive contributions. I think it's much more empowering to create change, like being a champion of a particular cause. I think it's much more, it substantially builds you and empowers your cause and inspires other people to do real change, apart from only concentrating on angry, outrage discussions. Yes. I also want to conclude by telling my fellow young people that we have an opportunity to build the country we want. There's still hope. We have the opportunity to write our own script. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Then you've heard it from our panelists today. It's been a very engaging and thrilling conversation, having these intelligent and brilliant young Ugandans on this show. I would like to say a very huge thank you to Center for Constitutional Governance, Civic Space TV, for making this happen, and to the technical team, Rashid and the crew. Thank you for always working hard and seeing that the show airs on time and it's there for the people to watch. And for you, the young Ugandans out there, we have to speak up to these issues. We need to own them and hold the relevant offices accountable, because these are matters that concern us. And these are not only matters that concern us, but matters that will definitely determine our futures. So today we discussed expired courses, what is the latest and way forward for the affected students, and briefly hinted on the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was recently assented to by the President. So from us to you, would say thank you, continue watching, and see you next week, same time, same place, Inter-University Debates. Thank you.